Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, this is Arlene.
Hi, this is Gowri.
And you're listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. Today we have a guest all the way from Penang. He will be sharing with us on the militarization of Islam. This is regarding on ISIS, Al-Qaeda and Al-Qassam. Welcome, Professor Ariffin. Omar?
Well, thank you, Arlene.
Yeah, before we start our conversation today, perhaps a bit of a background introduction of yourself?
Well, I was a lecturer for quite a while in the various universities in Malaysia. I did my PhD overseas in Australia. And after that, I came back and taught at a few more universities. Now I'm a politician.
Mm-hmm. And when you were still teaching and you were still doing your research, you focus a lot on Islam as part of, on political Islam as part of your research. And what were your findings when it comes to political Islam in the general sense in the Middle East as well as in Southeast Asia?
Well, Islam is, well, for many Muslims, Islam is not just a religion. It's not just a ritual in that sense. It's also, according to what they say, a way of life. And that way of life permeates all aspects of human existence, including politics. So many Muslims make the assumption that even in politics, Islam should be the basis of political activity. Therefore, you have a call to establish an Islamic state as a way of fulfilling the principles and the ideology of Islam. I do not subscribe to such a point of view. The reason being is that when Islam came into existence, there was no state in the actual sense of the word. The concept of state came into being after Westphalia. So what Islam came to at that point in time was a tribal community or communities in Arabia. So Islam was brought as a means to get them together, stop the fighting, and to establish a unity based on communal harmony. So there was no the issue of state. It was community. That was the basis of Islam at that point in time.
And Islam itself is actually a very peaceful religion, as we all know. At what point did it actually get misused, if I may use that term?
Well, Islam is by nature peaceful. Though, of course, there are many who will not agree to that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's happening today in the Middle East? In Islam, there's no justification for war. Unless, of course, it is for self-defense. You cannot attack anyone unprovoked. It is against Islamic teaching. In fact, Islam is the religion of peace. Mm-hmm. That is why to associate Islam with war seems to be an anomaly today. But ironically, that is precisely what is happening. Mainly because Islam has been subsumed into a violent political culture that wants to establish Islam as the basis of the state and is prepared to use force if necessary to achieve that aim. And this is precisely what we are seeing in the Middle East and also in some parts of Southeast Asia.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to the Middle East, the early on when we talk about transboundaries, terrorist groups, we would somehow think about Al-Qaeda. But what is the earliest political Islam where it has been considered as terrorist movement in the global world?
Well, if you are looking for earliest, in the sense, if you go back into the history of Islam, there was a terrorist group. They were known as the assassins, actually. That was, in fact, assassin, and the term assassin that we are using today,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the killer,
Yeah.
came from that period of time. There was a group of people.
Oh, it's supposed to be an Arabic word, is it?
Yes. They went around killing people they didn't like or didn't see their point of view. You see? So, there was a violent streak in the past, but today it's fairly common in the Middle East, mainly because of many, many reasons. One of the reasons is that the Middle East is an area of great instability. Regimes don't seem to be able to establish stability. And there are many reasons for that. And one of the main reasons is foreign intervention. There are very powerful countries that have vested interest in the Middle East, and they are interfering in these countries to ensure that their interests are maintained. That is the cause of great instability. Now, the second point is many of the regimes in the Middle East are anything but democratic. They are tyrannical, they are vicious, and they are brutal. Therefore, for many of those who are oppressed, they find their salvation in Islam, a radical form of Islam which seeks to overthrow this oppressive government, as well as to try to put an end to foreign intervention. Unfortunately, the path that they are taking is extremely violent and certainly does no good to the image of Islam, as we can see now, as in the case of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and ISIL.
So why do they actually choose to bring religion into achieving their political motives?
Well, because it is a very, very convenient tool. It is a religion that is adhered to or believed in by so many millions of Arabs. And they are using a medium that is familiar to many people. And they hope that by using Islam, they can get sympathies and support. And that's precisely what they have been doing. And undoubtedly, they have been quite successful, no doubt about it.
And when it comes to militarization of religion, in particularly Islam, why a lot of those who want to struggle for religion would go to that path of Islamic ideology? Why won't they go to the path of peaceful resistance like what Mahatma Gandhi would do?
Well, if there's peaceful resistance, the Middle East is not going to work. It's very, very clear. I mean, many of the regimes that are being overthrown today or facing challenges, they are facing challenges that are anything but peaceful. Which regime in the Middle East have gone away peacefully? No.
But why is not? It would not work in the Middle East, but elsewhere.
Because they don't have a culture of democracy with them, and also their societies are so riven by tribal loyalties that they are not able to work together. You have the Sunni-Shia divide, and you have tribal loyalties, and then you have political differences, and you have also got political alignments that are so very, very diverse and at times in contradiction with one another. It's precisely the perfect ingredient for violence.
But would it apply the same to countries such as Egypt, Syria, and Iraq? I mean, or would they have different factors or reason why they could not have peaceful movements?
Well, in the case of Iraq, there is already the Sunni and Shia divide. That's already a major problem. At the same time, there's also the issue of the Kurds. The Kurds who want their own state, who feel that they have been treated very, very badly in the past. I mean, these are issues that we cannot ignore. In the past, before the overthrow of Saddam Hussein, he may not be a saint, but at least he held the country together. But ever since the United States decided on its policy of regime change, they have destabilized the whole region, and there don't seem to be anything that can put the whole place together again.
What about Turkey? Turkey is a good example of democracy, isn't it?
Well, supposedly so. I mean, and that's also very recent, to be very frank with you. It's only very, very recent.
In the past, they were under Ottoman.
Anything, yeah. No, not just under Ottoman. They were under military rule for years and years. So democracy is a very recent phenomenon.
But why Turkey is able to move towards democracy and not the other Arab countries?
Because basically they are very stable. And also basically...
But they are a secular
state.
They are a secular state.
Yeah. Yeah, and they make sure that Islam doesn't predominate to the point that it can really threaten the security and stability of the state. They are secular. My contention is Islam can best thrive in a secular state.
But their current leader is a bit more Islamist than the past leaders, isn't it?
Yes, but then he has not tried to impose his Islamic views on everybody. He's following the constitution. You see, and that's the most important thing.
Would that be the reason why in Southeast Asia itself, Muslims are able to live peacefully and have peaceful demonstration?
Well, you must look at the history of many of these Southeast Asian countries. You take Indonesia, for example. Islam is not an official religion in Indonesia. They are the Pancasila. Though the majority of Indonesians are Muslims, but they are able and willing to give fair treatment and free play to all the various religions that are found there. And that is a very important ingredient to ensure stability of the state. Now, in Malaysia, we have a religion that is called the religion of the Federation that happens to be Islam. Now, here Islam has become a bone of contention between the Islamic Party and the UMNO Baru politicians. And it is being misused and manipulated to suit the interests of both sides. And that is why, to a certain extent in Malaysia, Islam, as it is being promoted, is causing a bit of unease and, to a certain extent, creating a sense of uneasiness among the non-Muslims. Now, so far there has been no violence in Malaysia, mainly because it's not the nature of Malaysians to settle matters through violence. We've got a very strong culture of tolerance among the Malays, the Chinese, Indians, and other communities in the Malaysian Federation. And that, to me, is a very important factor.
Mm-hmm. But why there are still Muslim in Southeast Asia that would join military forces or militarized movement like ISIS or Al-Qaeda?
Mainly because they are ignorant of what Al-Qaeda or ISIS really stands for. In fact, what is not known is many of them who go over, after finding out about it, they get very disillusioned. But you don't hear about it, either because they don't come back or they choose to remain silent. This is the one aspect of it. There are many UK Muslims who have gone to the Middle East to fight for ISIS, and they are quite unhappy, and they are returning back. Or many of them are held in Syria or Iraq, and they are not allowed to return. Mm-hmm. This is the reality that they face.
All this militarized or terrorist religious movement, such as ISIS, are they base their struggle on independence or wanting to have their own state, their own governance, or they are based it on certain religious ideology that they want to achieve?
ISIS has as its aim to establish a caliphate.
What is that exactly?
A caliphate is to have a spiritual leader who will be in charge of all the Muslims in this world. That is precisely what they want, and this is roughly what they are fighting for. To me, this is the most ridiculous thing to fight for. I mean, I can't imagine here in this country us subscribing to the ISIS ideology and putting our interests below their control. It doesn't make sense. I don't think that kind of struggle will ever succeed, because this is the age where countries fight for their own rights. It's the era where countries are sovereign. The caliphate cuts across boundaries, cuts across communities. Now, how is it going to be run? Who is going to be the caliph? And what is the basis of his power? And these are things that is not worked out. And yet they are fighting for a caliphate that is going to embrace all the Muslims. It doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, okay. So another area that I want to talk about is about ISIS, as I mentioned earlier. So what exactly is the aim and vision of ISIS? What is the end goal? So even if they want to have a caliphate Islamic state, but eventually their idea is it about global dominance, or is it about the countries in Syria and Iraq where they want to have their own governance?
Well, they are aiming to have control over all the Muslim majority states. Their ideology states that in countries where there are Muslim majorities, they should support ISIS and should recognize the caliph that was established by ISIS. And I think it's really far-fetched. Mm-hmm. Because it claims, religious authority over all Muslims across the world.
They are far-fetched. Why is it that it is far-fetched?
Who's going to accept that? I can't imagine. I mean, there are many Muslims in Malaysia, but I can't imagine the vast majority agreeing to this kind of idea. It doesn't make sense.
But
Indonesia is also, a Muslim majority state. Mm-hmm. You think the Indonesians would accept that?
Mm-hmm. Indonesia and Malaysia definitely has somehow put ISIS as a group that is not adhering according to Islamic values or Islam itself. But on the other hand, if you really read into the governance of ISIS, you will see a very well-structured organization that really have different areas that of not just of religion, but also of political structures that they take care of, unlike Al Qaeda.
Yes, I know that. I'm fully aware that ISIS has that area under its control. That area is being run, is being managed and administered. They've got civil servants, and they've got public officials. They do public functions. They carry out projects for the people that are under their control. Sure. But at the same time, we must also ask, the people who are living in this state, is it of their own free choice they accept ISIS, or they are forced to accept them? We don't really know. Mm-hmm. Yes, ISIS seems to be very well organized. In fact, far more organized than Al Qaeda.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
And
also very well funded. No doubt about it. They control oil fields. In fact, they are also involved in trade.
And they are involved in the oil production and resources.
Yes, that's true. They control oil. They sell oil.
Mm-hmm. But when it comes to Al Qaeda, it doesn't seem to be as regional or global as ISIS. Why ISIS is different from Al Qaeda?
In the first place, ISIS is an offshoot of Al Qaeda. They learn from the weaknesses of Al Qaeda.
What are the weaknesses?
Al Qaeda is a group that is not located in any one particular state. It moves from place to place. And it doesn't have a really well-defined program and purpose. Their aim is to attack Western, what they see as Western regimes that are supporting repressive regimes.
So it's a very us against them sort of ideology, rather than a different sort of ideology.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And what else about ISIS that is different from Al Qaeda?
Well, Al Qaeda has got enemies which are very clearly defined. I mean, the 9/11, they attacked the Americans, and they've carried out attacks against the Americans. They've got a very defined enemy. ISIS, basically, if they can help it, they're not prepared to go to war with America or with any other Western country. What they want is to spread their reach in territories where there are Muslim majorities and establish the Islamic State. All they want is to be left alone to do their own thing. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, they realize that by trying to do their own thing, they're also infringing on the interests of many powerful countries. And these countries are not going to sit back and allow ISIS to do what they like.
But it seems like countries, big powers like the US or Europe, they didn't really react as strongly until members of their citizens being beheaded by ISIS.
Yes, that's the whole point. You know, finally, when it reaches a stage where the aims of ISIS conflict with the interests of these European states, then of course you will expect a conflict. It's just a matter of time.
Mm-hmm. So that means that they are the one who started the war against the West by beheading all this in front of the camera, all these American journalists.
Fine, that's one way to look at it. But then they can turn around and say, we didn't start the war. You started bombing us, you started attacking us, and you started supplying arms to our enemies, so we have no choice but to act against you. You see, there are two sides to the coin.
Mm. We will take a short break. When we return, we will discuss more about Al-Qassam and what is the future ahead for these Islamic groups.
ASEAN Breakfast Call Dialogue, widening your horizons.
Hi, we are back again. This is Arlene.
This is Gowri.
Yes, okay.
And together with, of course, Professor Ariffin Omar, to discuss about the militarization of Islam. Early on, we discussed extensively about ISIS and Al Qaeda, and also the idea of political Islam. So I want to touch on Al-Qassam. As we all know, Al-Qassam is the military wing of the Hamas. So
yeah, that's right.
what is actually Al-Qassam? Do you consider it as a terrorist group or just a military wing of the organization Hamas?
I will never consider it a terrorist group. I mean, that whole trouble with classifying groups as terrorists depends on which perspective you are taking. I mean, for the Palestinians, they're totally at the mercy of the Zionist Israeli state, they need an organization to defend them. And that role has been played quite effectively by the Al-Qassam Brigade. It was, of course, I know it was created in 1992. At that time, it opposed the Oslo Accords. But leaving that aside, the main task that Al-Qassam has been doing is to keep on attacking Israel and to force the Israelis to come to an agreement with the Palestinians, which unfortunately for the moment is not happening. This sort of fight is carrying on. And how long they are prepared to carry on, it depends on how much support they have and how much sacrifices they are prepared to make.
Mm-hmm. And with Qassam, so if they are not a terrorist group, are they a separatist group that is fighting for the independence of Palestine or the eradication of Israel?
Well, frankly, if they could, they would definitely love to eradicate Israel. But that is no longer an option, and it's no longer a realistic plan. Okay? So the best they could do is to keep on hitting the Israelis to the point that they wear the Israelis down and finally force the Israelis to come to some sort of working agreement, where at least an acceptance of some aspects of the demands of the Palestinians. Even that, I'm not very sure whether they will succeed.
And I just want to touch a little bit on the news recently. There's been a lot of articles written about ISIS and Al-Qaeda being at feuds with each other. So what would the impact be if ISIS actually takes over and trumps Al-Qaeda in that sense?
Well, Al-Qaeda, to my mind, is slowly fading away.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's getting to be less and less influential and powerful. And for the moment, many Muslims, or at least the ones who are misguided or radicalized, seem to be more focused on ISIS because they see ISIS as being able to achieve something. Mm-hmm. Whereas all Al-Qaeda has done is to blow up a few American buildings, kill a few Americans, and nothing beyond that, you see. And after the loss of Osama bin Laden, it's not likely that they can find anyone else who can replace him.
But is this what Islam is about, or Muslim wants?
No, I don't think Islam should be like this, and this is not what the Muslim wants. It doesn't make sense at all.
What exactly?
There's something really wrong.
Then what exactly Muslim wants, if not having political Islam?
Well, if I were to speak, I cannot speak for every Muslim. I think each and every Muslim has got his own point of view what Islam wants. I think the most important thing, Islam as a religion and Muslims as a people who believe in the religion of Islam want to be left in peace. That's one important thing. They want to be allowed to run their own lives and plan their own future without interference from big powers. To them, what is important is the ability to have a say in the planning of their future and their own welfare. And that can only be achieved if the regimes that are running the states in which these Muslims live in are regimes which are receptive to the calls of the people and take cognizance of their welfare. Now, as long as you have regimes that are propped up by Western powers, regimes that are brutal, cruel, authoritarian, and non-democratic, then of course the next recourse is violence, political violence, using Islam as an instrument as well as the medium of violence. Now, this is basically the last card that the Muslims have to use. They have no other option left. What else can they do?
Mm-hmm. Let's look at the positive side. What are the responses by majority of the key ulama and also Muslim governments around the world in terms of how they see ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and other Muslim Islamic political Islamic movement that is happening moving around the world right now?
Well, many of these governments are basically opportunistic. And many of these ulamas are really pathetic. They choose to remain silent. Very few of them come out openly to condemn the terrorism and the brutality that is being practiced by ISIS. In fact, it's in one head of state in a Southeast Asian country that even asked people to emulate the ISIS. I'm sure you know who I'm referring to and which country it is. No doubt about it. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, not many countries are going to follow that example. Otherwise, it may be rather awkward. Mm-hmm. Okay? The reality is that many Muslims are not happy with ISIS, but they choose to remain silent because there's precious little they can do. There's not much.
But to look at ISIS, they are actually trying to go for they are asserting their authority towards all the Muslims all around the world. But even within themselves, they have this conflict between the Sunnis and Shia. So how will they go about tackling that issue to achieve unity among all Muslims?
Well, that is something that is impossible. When you say unity, what exactly do you mean by unity? That all should be under one particular belief and one particular understanding of what Islam is all about. I don't think that's ever possible at all. There'll be differences in opinion, there'll be differences in interpretation, there'll be differences in approach to Islam.
So
the tragedy with ISIS is they expect everyone to be like them. It's not possible. So it is totally unworkable, and they are going to fail in the long run. Ultimately, even Muslims will rise against them and fight against them.
So you're saying that it is impossible for ISIS to actually achieve their end goal, to go for that one caliphate that everyone bows to?
No, it's not going to work. It's not possible to achieve it.
And apart from that, they've also been targeting the Pope recently, saying that they want to kind of it's of course not a confirmed news, but they said they have been targeting to kill the Pope, and that helps to strengthen their position.
I don't see how killing the Pope will ever strengthen their position. If they kill the Pope, they're going to invite unending reprisals upon themselves, and probably they will themselves cease to exist.
Any of the separatist group in Southeast Asia have links with ISIS or Al-Qaeda? For example, the separatist group in Mindanao.
Islam. Yeah, the Abu Sayyaf have said that they are with ISIS now. There are also small groups in Malaysia, Indonesia, that are somewhat sympathetic to ISIS. But of course, they are not say it so openly for fear of being arrested and put in prison. But they are there, lurking below the surface.
So, if ISIS insisted on having this caliph state or this Khalifa-centered state, what is the way forward for Western countries as well as Muslim countries that are aware of this to somehow counter them? As far as I know, countries in the Middle East that are foes with each other, such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, are working alongside each other together with the US to fight against ISIS. But is it that's all should the government do, which is using military power to fight against ISIS? Is there any other areas that governments all around the world, either Muslim governments or Western governments, need to focus on?
Well, there's plenty they can do. Right now, they have no option but to use military power. And the irony is that those people who are working together to destroy ISIS, actually, they hate ISIS more than they hate each other, but there's very little love lost among them. That's the reality of it all. And in order to prevent groups like ISIS from emerging, they have to reform themselves. These states have to reform themselves. They've got to give basic human rights to their people. They've got to improve the standard of living, the quality of life. Economically, they have to uplift their country and give a better standard of living to their people. Are they prepared to do this? So long as they are not prepared to do this, then of course, these areas will be very fertile ground for every sort of radical group that is now in existence around that area. It's a matter of which one takes precedence.
And oil is the major sources for ISIS to get their funding. Should Americans and other political forces stop buying oil from ISIS? Or have they done that?
Well, for the moment, ISIS will control quite oil fields around Iraq,
Or would it have any geopolitical impact if any government stop the buying of oil that they produce?
Frankly, in the world of international politics, morality and ethics has got no role. Governments will take whatever action that is expedient to serve their own political interests, even if it means trading with the devil. There are groups that are trading with ISIS, no doubt about it, buying oil from them. And they do so discreetly. I mean, what do you expect in the world of international relations? This is the way it is.
So in that sense, will it stay the same, or would there be any other development in terms of getting people to go against ISIS, not just in the military sense, but also ideologically?
Well, of course, they will try to galvanize support and try to get people to go against ISIS, but how long will it take?
Mhm.
And how much of an effort will that require? And will it very bear fruit? There will come a time when they will be able to reduce the influence of ISIS. They'll be able to take over territories that are controlled by ISIS. But I have my doubts. If they can totally eliminate ISIS, it'll be there in the background, waiting to spring back again.
How the birth of ISIS have somehow changed Islam or the Islam as an ideology compared to
Well,
yesteryears?
Frankly, it has given a very ugly image of Islam. Yes. Islam is now seen as a religion that is totally intolerant, unwilling to compromise, and is prepared to use wholesale slaughter and massacre to achieve its aim of spreading its beliefs. I think this is one of the tragic vision we have of the situation that is in existence today.
Mhm.
Now, for that to change, it will require time and a major effort on the part of the Islamic countries to work together to put an end to this. But are they prepared to do it?
As we all know, some of the Malaysian that went to ISIS to fight for them are, of course, from political party, members of certain political parties as well.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering, like, have political parties in Malaysia that have Islam as its ideology doing anything to curb the spread of ISIS ideology within the Malay Muslim population?
They're doing nothing. On the contrary, when none of their members join ISIS, the first thing they do, at least outwardly, is to expel him from the party. But yet, after he's killed in Syria, he's eulogized as a martyr. So what does that tell you? You see, this is the reality that we are facing in Malaysia.
Mhm. Is it also shows that Malaysia's Islamic parties are leaning towards the idea that Islam should be a militaristic ideology or a political ideology?
They have never ever given up their aim to establish an Islamic state, even though they are not so vociferous about it. Neither have they given up their aims to have hudud laws implemented in this country. But the fact of the matter is that they have kept it in the background in the hope that one fine day, by not mentioning it too publicly, they might be able to lull non-Muslims and a good majority of the Muslims into a sense of a belief that everything will be all right if these parties come to power. But once they're in power, then of course, everything will change. They'll do exactly what they wanted to do in the first place. And that will be the beginning of serious problems for the whole country.
Mm-hmm. So with that, it seems like ISIS is, instead of going backwards, is actually getting more and more stronger. Even Islamic political parties, Islamic leaders have very little say in terms of trying to dispel its legitimacy. So
Yes.
for you yourself, like, what would be the way forward for Muslim leaders to be able to go beyond the ideology that ISIS is spreading right now?
I think the most important thing for Muslim leaders to do is to recognize that it's futile to fight for any Islamic state, and it's also not logical to insist on the implementation of hudud laws that are very, very good maybe in the 7th century, but this is the 21st century. You see, so far we have done so well with civil laws in this country. It's not perfect, but it's workable. But now with attempts to try to implement hudud, then the system might break down, or there will be great resentment. And this in turn will lead to a lot of instability. The only solution to my mind is to decouple religion from the state.
Mm-hmm. So to
This
create
religion
a
to be the preserve. No, the religion should be the preserve of the individual. There should be no state authority or any authority for that matter trying to legislate moral behavior or religious conduct.
Mhm.
Religion should be a totally private matter. That is the way it should be.
But if religion is not part of the state, then how can people facilitate laws for marriage or for divorce and all that, or inheritance as well?
Well, in many countries that are progressive, you can have a choice. if you want to accept civil laws as a means of deciding inheritance, fine. You find that Sharia law is more applicable to you and you believe in it and you think that it's more fair, you can opt for Sharia law. That should be the choice, actually. It should not be imposed. That is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And for ISIS, as we all know, ISIS is very good in terms of delivering its message in social media. How can people be more aware if they know people can get information about ISIS via social media, and how can they curb that information? Should the government just totally ban certain websites that promote radicalization, or should there be more education and all that?
I believe is there is no point banning. If you ban also, they can find ways to go around it. You'll be playing catch me if you can with these people. The best thing is to educate the public what ISIS is, what it stands for, what's wrong with this ideology. Get an open debate going.
Right now, is there any open debate about ISIS between either among the government or civil society?
No, not for the moment. Not for the moment, because there's no avenue for it. It's only within a small group of select people who are interested in the issue. For the moment, the vast majority don't seem to be interested at all.
Even
it's not that, you see, the point is that ISIS hasn't really impinged on the way of life here in this country, or for that matter in Asia, with the exception of a few people who are going over to the Middle East.
Mm-hmm. So let's say the worst come to worst, ISIS ideology or movement did come to Southeast Asia. Then what would Southeast Asia be like?
Well, the Indonesians will be very, very capable of coping with it. They have been able to cope with all these kind of extremist organizations for a long, long time and, curb them. It's only we in Malaysia that might have a bit of a problem, you see? Mm-hmm. Because if, say, a militant group like ISIS has very strong influence here, then many vested interests in Malaysia will be threatened. Mm-hmm. For example, the position of the monarchy. That's one. Next, in Malaysia, the system of parliamentary democracy. Definitely, it'll have to be done away with, because there's nothing in ISIS ideology that tolerates that kind of democratic system that we have in this country. So, I think it will threaten so many interests that they'll have to do something about it.
Mm-hmm. In Indonesia, Jokowi have made a pledge to make national security and also to curb radicalization as part of its main policy, and in order for the country to progress forward. Is curbing radicalization and increasing our national security towards threats of radicalization is part of Malaysian's government's effort as well?
Well, even if it's part of the efforts, I don't think they know how to go about doing it. That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm. So what's the way forward Malaysian government can do to curb the spread of ISIS and also other forms of radicalization?
Maybe the way forward for them is to firstly clamp down on extremist Muslim groups that are already in this country. They are misusing Islam, that are insulting the religious beliefs of other people.
But people do not want to revert back to ISA, isn't it?
No, there are more than enough laws in this country to deal with such behavior. You don't need the ISA. But the fact is the government is too lazy to go around and do its investigation thoroughly and to get the facts to prosecute these people. So the ISA is a very simple net that doesn't require much proof before you put anyone in prison.
Mm-hmm. So what's your last message if you have any info to deliver to Malaysians when it comes to political Islam and radicalization of religion?
I think my last message I would like to tell to Malaysians is a very simple message. If you really want peace, then you better go all out to ensure that a secular democratic state exists in Malaysia.
Mm-hmm. With that, thank you very much, Professor Ariffin. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Bye.
Bye.